Welcome to Inside the Collective, the show where we explore how people rethink the way we work, lead, and create. Today's guest is someone I haven't spoken to in far too many years, but whose brain and energy I remember well from our Saatchi Sydney days. Saul Betmead de Chasteigner. Hopefully I've pronounced that right. Saul is now an associate fellow at Oxford, Said Business School, a former CMO of United Nations World Food Programme, and the founder of All Things Considered, where he helps leaders see more clearly and think more boldly. He's worked across agencies, humanitarian missions, innovation labs, and in true Saul fashion, once ran the life-saving club at North Bondi to keep things interesting. He spent his career helping people shift perspective in all the right ways. Saul, it's really great to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for those kind words. That's very sweet of you to sum up my life like that. It makes me sound much more impressive than I am.
I having known you as long as I have, I disagree, but I love the humility. All right, so we're going to ease into this with a quick round of this or that. Oxford tea or Bondi coffee?
Oh, that's not fair. You can't start with. Oh, I'll have to go with Oxford tea.
And that's why you haven't been back to Australia.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I'm from Cambridge, though, which is very confusing. We could talk about that another time if you want.
All right. Deep work morning or long reflective walk?
Oh, could you say that again?
Deep work morning or long reflective walk?
Deep work morning.
Coaching leaders or challenging assumptions?
Challenging assumptions.
Surf rescue or boardroom rescue?
Surf rescue.
Nice. All right. Easy bits over, Saul. Let's now dig into the more challenging questions.
Very good. That's very good. That's very difficult. They're very difficult. Hopefully the rest are easier than that.
Well, yeah, but we'll see. We'll see how we go with it. So when you rewind right back, what first pulled you towards psychology and what part of that still guides how you see people today?
A friend of mine killed herself when I was 19.
Oh,
and
sorry.
It was no. It was a very. I was talking to one of my best friends about it last night, and it really affected me. And I'd done a lot of. I've always been quite altruistic. I did lots of voluntary work in the local. It's called a mental hospital. Then you don't call it that now, but I remember just realizing that at some deep level that was the frame through which we see the world is just how we think about, how we believe about things. And my friend, all of us thought she was fine, and then she wasn't. And I just remember just having this just revelation about what's going on inside of us is actually quite different from what's going outside of us. And I remember just thinking, I need to understand this better. And that's why I ended up studying psychology. And it's the red thread through everything. And it's, you can't really. I have this notion that you behind every business problem and opportunity lies a human one. They're the ones that start companies. They're the ones that keep them alive. They're the ones that buy from companies. It's always very easy to get blindsided by the business and the technology. It's actually people. And so I keep coming back to psychology, even though it was a kind of sad start to that. It's a fascinating world because it's just, we don't really understand ourselves very well. We barely understand others. And it's one of those, it's the problem that you'll never really understand. So for me, I'm quite an intellectually curious person. I'm quite a restless person. And it's just a problem that just it's a puzzle that just keeps on giving. Every day I read another paper and I didn't realize that. Or I have I'm running a leadership session in Oxford, and I just hadn't thought about that before. For me, that's why it's stayed with me for so long. Is because it's the most challenging thing you can do, really, is try and understand people and how they tick.
Absolutely. You started your career in the thick of agency life. What did those early Saatchi Sydney years teach you about people, pressure, and performance?
I'm a big fan of that time in my life. For me, I know there's a debate about this, but I feel like a family to me, and the leaders, and we had good and bad leaders, as you remember. The leaders who were really good, you felt like they were on your side and they understood you, as well as being very competent and visionary, whatever you want to call that thing. They were inspiring. But I remember feeling quite excited by that time, but also just my notion of leadership has changed quite a lot over time. Perhaps we can talk about that. But yeah, it was very much this guy called Mark Green, if you remember him, who's gone on to amazing things. We worked on a new business together, and he described pitching as a benevolent dictatorship, which I think is quite an interesting way of thinking about it. But I always felt like we were always together as a group. You know, a lot of people drank together, they went out together a lot. There was a cohesion that I haven't really had many times in my life at work. And so the question you ask is a really good one, because the performance aspect of it came from that cohesion and that understanding between each other. And I think if I reflect on different leadership coming in at different times, you know when you become very aware when it's not there. There's somebody trying to tell you what to do without you respecting them. I think that's at the essence of leadership in one level. Is you just have to respect and trust the other, however senior they are. And I always got the feeling that that's what it was, especially at Saatchi & Sidney at that particular time, which was doing really well as well. There was a sense of trust and compassion, as well as a lot of really fucking good people, and they really knew what they were doing. But it was that cohesion. I don't know whether you found the same thing. It's just there was a sense of family, which I don't think I've experienced many times since.
You spend a lot of your time helping leaders create better futures. When you strip the theory away, what does that actually look like in the room?
It's about having meaningful conversations about stuff that people generally either don't notice or don't want to have. So I will, after quite a lot of warm up, it takes quite a long time to get trust. I'll usually get to things like, and there's different ways of interpreting this, but it's personal, but also the commercial level. What are your elephants in the room? What would you have meetings where people don't talk about the stuff they should be talking about and talk about everything else? Where are you lying to yourself? And often though, and I get people to work on their own first, and then they get people to work in pairs, and then I get people to share if they want to. I never force people to share. And once you've built up a trusted environment, the stuff comes up. I was working with a Middle East company a couple of weeks ago, and you know it's a 4-day program, so I'd spent 4 days with these people, and I asked those questions later in the week, and it was lovely. You could feel the bubble burst, and they just go, oh my god, and they all said something very similar. There's a lot of nodding when they start talking about those things, but it takes quite a lot of effort to surface that stuff, and it takes quite a lot of trust, because those are questions that most of the time in the commercial reality of any organization, and actually I'd argue in life, we're just on go, we're moving forward, and we don't stop and pause and have a look. And it's only when you do that you start to see patterns, and you start to see what's really going on with a team dynamic or a company strategy. That's when the stuff comes up. I think it's Warren Buffett. He said the biggest challenge for companies is complacency. So I call them anti-complacency weapons. But you just get people just to check their assumption. I mean, I obviously worked a lot in assumptions, but it's often difficult to know what you mean by that. But just assuming that what you've been doing is right, and that what you could be doing is wrong. Getting people to talk about that sort of stuff is actually very difficult, but it can be very cathartic and very useful for companies. It's just very difficult to get there often.
Ask people to test their ideas against reality. How do you help a group let go of something that no longer fits?
So I'm a framework monkey, as my wife says. I've got models I use. I've got a thing I call 5 sites. And so that's essentially a structure that just forces you to step outside and have a look, which is the essence of your question, which is I call hindsight. So you're looking back at what worked before, what assumptions, what are the conventions of your thinking or the category. Then foresight, which is actually what do you believe about the future that others don't. What's your foresight? What's your prediction? And then insight, which is what makes you interesting and capable and special. Outside, which is what do you need to grow. Often that isn't what you've got inside the company, it's what you've got outside the company. And then oversight, which is how do you structure yourself. Usually the reason I use those 5 things is it tends to tease out your belief systems and your thinking systems in a way that allows you to see a clearer picture of what you think you understand an idea is, what you understand your current mental model is of the world. And once you do that, I mean, I wrote an essay on this the other day of the ad industry and just how it actually isn't able to see different ideas because it's stuck in its own. It's called exploit. You're exploiting what you're currently good at rather than exploring what you need to be good at. I use that as a system because it just tends to just separate out things that you kind of bundle together. And it's very easy to bundle them together because again, you're trying to make money. You're in the business of work at any given moment. It's just really hard to step outside that sort of stuff. So I tend to use things like that. Also, people find it quite, when you have a system and you've used it before, people trust the system a bit. Okay, this person knows what they're doing. I can see the benefit in that. And you often give them a case study or an example from somebody else just to say, okay, this is how it works. So to give them examples of what I mean. So that's how I usually try and do that. I use systems to unpack things.
I'm a huge fan of systems. It makes things a lot easier to get to where you need to go. Yeah. You've worked in political, creative, and humanitarian environments. What surprised you most about stepping into the UN?
It's very bureaucratic, which wasn't surprising. It's very political. Again, that's not really surprising, but I imagined it being much flatter and much less political because it's full of really, really well-intentioned, capable people. It really is. But it's enormous. Like any large organization, it's very complicated. I was only there for a couple of years, but it's just a very complicated, politically orientated system. Again, I think I was only surprised because I think my belief of what it was different from what I believed any other organization was. It's just like any other organization, big diversified organization with layers, with legacy assumptions, with legacy systems, dealing with the worst stuff in the world. Even the World Food Program where I work, I think it feeds like 140 million people a year. And it's also got, that's a humanitarian, but it's also got development work, which is helping fix the underlying problems. You just take one look at the development goals and you realize how incredibly complicated and interconnected the system is. And then you try and think about all these different organizations. They come under one banner, but there's lots of different organizations there's a lot of overlap between them. I think if I thought about it properly, it wouldn't have been surprising because it's like a big organization. But I found it very surprising because I hadn't really understood what I was going into.
So you've talked about. I'm sure we could talk about that all night, and I would just keep asking more and more questions about it. It's very intriguing. Talking about organizations, and you've mentioned that they can develop success syndrome. What does that look like in real life?
I mean, the success syndrome is a concept created by a couple of Harvard academics to explain why companies in the long run struggle to adopt and find new technologies. We can debate that. There's lots of interesting things about that, but essentially they said, look, there's a thing called the success factor where all of the systems are designed to exploit what you're currently good at, not explore what you might be good at in the future. And that those are your operating system, your culture, which is probably arguably the strongest one, KPIs, everything. It's not a surprise, especially when a company's listed, it's got quarterly targets. It's just you're designed to do one thing, and it just shows up because it's all of the stuff that they do. It's about optimization, it's about efficiency. It's often never about the big stuff that might be interesting, but it's really hard for them to get their head around. And you often see in companies like that, you see, how would I describe it? It's like a nominal explorative activity. I mean, ad agencies do it quite a lot. They have like a hub that's just looking at new ideas, creating IP, but they don't really take it very seriously. So what does it feel like? It feels like this is an efficiency engine. Optimization. It's about how much money can we make, what our margins are, and then occasional token explorative ideas that look quite sexy, good PR, but aren't particularly relevant to the core business. And then when you ask leaders in the meeting, go, how seriously are you taking that? What would that look like if you took to take it seriously? Often those are difficult conversations because my KPIs are not about exploring. They're not really about challenging our business model, because that's our business model. That's how we make our money now. Very difficult to balance those two things together, in my experience.
I just want to do a time check. We're coming up on a half hour. Are you okay for a few?
Yeah, no, I'm okay. No, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
All right. When you teach at Oxford, what's the shift you most often see when people suddenly get it?
It depends what I'm involved in quite a few different things, but in the leadership work, it can be very personal. It can be very collective. It depends on the program, but the way programs are designed at the business school is lots of really interesting perspectives from interesting people. So you might have a negotiation session. So you're forced to think differently about negotiation. So the Oxford way of doing it is to not see us versus them, but us plus you versus the situation. So you do that. You also do like half a day on scenario planning. What does the future look like? Or you'll get they have one of the other associate fellows is an orchestra conductor, and he gets them to interact with an orchestra. It's a combination of these things, and it depends on the group and it depends on the person. But one of those things, or a combination of things, we go, I just hadn't thought about it like that. I just hadn't thought about it like that at all. It's just these forced perspectives, or it might be, going to a museum or meeting there's a guy I was in a session the other day with a guy he's a specialist in spiderweb technology, so he uses threads to create new fabrics. It's like, yeah, completely outside my domain of skill, but it makes you think differently about what you know about things, and that's what's really good about that whole system. It's just but it often is a number of different things, or it can be one thing where wow, that was there's a session that is about finding your voice and about role playing and putting yourself into somebody else's shoes, and because most people don't like doing that, it's embarrassing, and it's a professional actor who does it, but that often makes you go, oh god, oh my god, I didn't realize that's what I was like. I didn't realize that's what I was like. So it's a combination of things, but ultimately be one thing but that's built from the other things that just make people go, oh my God, I just haven't. That's changed my view of how that is, what that's about. It's one of the great things about those sort of programs is they can be very, very revealing and very, very, very disturbing on one level, but really, really profoundly positive disturbing on another. Part of my job is to help them navigate that.
You work across democracy, peace building, innovation, and leadership. What ties those worlds together for you?
I struggle to explain what I do sometimes. I've got quite a few hats, but there's something that sits at the center, which is I think I'm in the business of transformative thinking and getting people to reassess what they think they know, give them tools and systems to get them to step in and outside of themselves, and then try and imagine what else they could be. That is a pretty much everything I do. Even when I dip back into marketing, which I do occasionally, it's still the same stuff. I suspect the people in the Carrot Collective, they do that at some level, in some way. I mean, it's for me, that's what binds all of that stuff together. What I find so interesting is it's very difficult to do, and change is very difficult to imagine on lots of different. I can talk about that for hours. The psychology of change is fascinating. It's very difficult to do. But to get people to find things that allow people to do that is very rewarding, but it's also very difficult. Probably my own expertise. That's probably the one thing I excel at now. If I'm going to pat myself on the back.
As you should.
I should.
You've lived and worked across cultures. How has that shaped the way you interpret what people mean and intend?
It's interesting. They're just when we were talking about Australia at the beginning. There's so, for example, British and Australian culture looks very similar, but it's quite different. And I mean, the surf club is one of the things I loved about my time at the surf club was I'm quite a posh English person. I'm from Cambridge, so I sound quite posh. Nobody gave a shit about my accent, other than I was a pom. I met people there, and I think there's a sort of a lens to Australia. I met people there who were from all walks of life. A neurosurgeon, all the way down to a garbage collector and electrician. They're friends still. I wouldn't have met them. I wouldn't have had those connections, those conversations, because it wasn't about which school I went to, how I talked, which is very British. I found that weird going back. So that's one part of it. I mean, I now live in France. I'm married to a French woman, which is why I've got a very strange name. The cultural differences are more obvious. Perhaps we can go into that another time. But for me, the culture eats strategy for breakfast. I always thought that was bollocks, but I think it's probably true, because the culture that surrounds people often defines the lens through which they understand things. Those assumptions, again, their belief systems. It's incredibly powerful, because the culture you live in pretty much defines what you think about things to a very large extent. And I was listening to a podcast on Churchill, who I'm a big fan of. His point of view on certain things are very strange to us now, but it's a cultural thing. I suspect if he was brought up in our culture, he'd have very different views. And I think that's really important. Culture as a filter, it's the primary filter for lots of things.
You mentioned the surf life saving, and that feels really far from boardrooms. What did the world of surf life saving teach you about teamwork and staying calm when it counts?
I was talking about this on an interview the other day. I realized that my model of leadership, when I was the captain of the surf club, so it was like 2,500 people, all volunteers, a lot of people with a huge amount of experience. It was about nurturing and understanding other people's points of views, and then helping them make decisions, rather than making decisions myself. Because I talk about earned authority versus executive authority. I had to earn the authority. I was known, I got elected, but ultimately you're only as good as the ability to make decisions in the moment. And the second part of your question, which is just you get trained, especially on the beach, you just get trained over and over again to deal with situations that can be very difficult. You have to resuscitate or not resuscitate somebody. You have to read a surf situation so you can actually make sure that somebody gets rescued or prevent them from being hurt. Those are much easier decisions on the beach because you're trained, you know what to do. There are systems. When you get into the politics of surf clubs, it becomes much harder, which is much more about it isn't binary what you should be doing. It's not obvious what you should be doing. It's much more it's much a softer skill where you're trying to shape people's opinions and move people in a certain direction. They're two almost completely different operating systems. One's more like the army, the other one's more like a family structure where you're just trying to use your persuasion skills to move people in a certain direction. I've never been asked that before. That's a really good question.
I'll take it as a compliment. Becoming a parent resets everything. What's shifted in how you think about time, ambition, and what matters?
I mean, it's the ultimate leveler in terms of prioritization. I'm quite an efficient person. I just, for 3 months, Amelie and I didn't. We barely had time to kind of do normal things like try and eat. It was, and then so when I then re-engaged with work, it's the ultimate filter. Go, what is actually important? What's really important? And that you start to ask questions like, if I did this, what else would be much easier? It forces you to find fulcrums, like key maximum leverage levers, and there's no time to do anything else. So it just forces you to go, look, Maya's the most important thing, then Amelie's the most important thing, then me, and then work. So you've got these. I've just never had that before. There are some basic things that it's hard to get to the basics, let alone the stuff that is important to your career or to your reputation. I've never experienced anything like that, where you just drop down. All of that stuff drops down because it's just not important, not really. And it made me realize the stuff that I used to worry about, I don't worry about anymore. And I do a lot of stuff now that is very, very focused on that I think is going to get maximum traction or maximum bang for its buck. Whereas I would have done lots of other things. Yeah, I mean, it's the ultimate prioritization weapon at a very, very deep level. I know a lot of other people have got kids. It's like I just hadn't understood it before. I didn't understand. I write a lot about prioritization, and I didn't really understand it before. Not really.
So, what is it that you hope your child sees and how you move through the world?
That is a very profound question. I'd like to think that they see me as being a kind, thoughtful man who is respectful of others' opinions and who made the best use of what he was given. I struggled academically as a kid. I really struggled. That's partly context because I was in Cambridge surrounded by kids of academics, but I really struggled. So the one thing I'm most proud of is my ability to take what is kind of like an average engine and make it into something that is quite impressive. But that's because of the work I've done, the work ethic. So I think those things, kindness, thoughtful, and also try to make the best use of what you're given. Some people are given a Ferrari. I wasn't. So I think that's what I'm gonna. Actually, we've just done a lot of videos for Maya's first birthday, and I've got to do my video. So that's one of the things that's a good practice for that.
two last questions for you. What's one idea you wish more leaders would sit with a little longer?
The theory of why their business works. Do they understand what it is? And do they understand, are there moments, what do they need to understand about that theory to know whether it's right or wrong or whether it needs changing? So I have a fundamental assumption that strategy is about theory. So you've got a theory about a situation. I find it really helpful. Do you have a sense of what that is? Can you explain it? What assumptions it's based on? And how do you know when those assumptions might be wrong? Then that's the question I'd ask.
Our traditional closing question: what would you do if you were not afraid?
Speak more French.
Hmm.
I got functional French, but I don't do in French what I do in English, and the fear is the thing that holds me back. Because arguably I'm quite good in English, and I don't have that in French, and it's fear. I think I pretty much attacked most of the other things I'm terrified of, but that's the one thing I struggle with every day.
Nice. Saul, I just want to say thank you so much. It's been a pleasure seeing you reconnecting after 20 years. And it's conversations like this that help us work together. So thank you so much for sharing your story and your thinking, and we look forward to seeing what you shape next.
Thank you very much, and fantastic questions. Really made me think. I've written a few of them down. Actually, I need to have a think about them more. But thank you.